So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to Doing Business in Latin America, Edtech and the Business of Education, sponsored by Advancing Global EDU. I'm Mike Campbell, President of Advancing Global EDU. Let me pull up these slides here and we'll get started. Today, we have a great agenda for you for the next 40 minutes. Your Zoom has been set to chat only, and you can ask questions in the chat or in the Q&A tab, and we will answer as many questions as possible during that time. So feel free to ask questions. And if we can't get to your questions, we'll be sure to follow up with you via email. Our keynote speakers will be focused on the business and strategy of doing business in Latin America, from the business of education to the sales and marketing and the final customers. Many of you are familiar with the work that our advisors here at Advancing Global EDU do. But we're happy to work with many companies and organizations in the education sector, from educational data to content development platforms, to special education solutions providers, to digital citizenship and literacy solutions, and to professional learning providers. Our goal is to help students, educators, and our clients achieve their goals. In the past few months, we've developed a relationship with our keynote speaker today and his firm for that exact reason. His skills in Latin America bring tremendous value to you and to our ecosystem. The growth in Latin America and his experience and his network offers you the ability to grow your business through strategy and knowledge of that market. Fernando Valenzuela Migoya is a recognized leader in Latin America as a specialist in digital transformation processes to maximize human potential. He's been selected as one of the 100 most influential minds in the EdTech industry and in the world by EdTech Digest magazine, and recognized by the same publication as a visionary for 2022. He works with educational companies to provide strategic advisory services and mentoring as they grow their businesses in Latin America and globally. And we're extremely proud to work with Fernando and to know that his experiences and his network will add value to the Advancing Global EDU network. Many of you already know George DeBakey. George has been involved in the international business for over 40 years in the private and public sectors. George assists educational firms to expand and develop their business overseas. He has assisted firms to expand into the U.S. educational markets as well. And his major focus, though, has been in the education sector and K-12 schools, especially those international schools in the Middle East and around the world. His involvement in areas of gaming, esports, language products, educational technology, ebooks, literacy, science, STEM, and many other special areas have given him that ability to work with these schools around the world. He has worked with firms from the US, UK, Australia, Canada, Estonia, and the Middle East especially. George also serves as international advisors to many firms here in the US and abroad, and has worked with the Advancing Global EDU firm for the last 6 years. And we're proud to have him speak today on our behalf. At this time, I'd like to turn over the agenda to Fernando, and Fernando will be speaking for the next 30 minutes or so. Fernando?
Thank you so much, Michael. It's great to be here and great to share the stage with my friend George as well. So looking forward to this partnership and the idea of reflecting on the challenges and opportunities for Latin America. The objective here is to give you a very broad, quick view on what is going on in the region, and then talk to you, open the chat to discuss the potential opportunities for companies in the US and other markets to enter and capture these opportunities in the region. So let me just check first that my presentation can be seen and is changing, because sometimes it gets, so if Michael, if you don't mind, just tell me that this is okay. Hopefully we are all seeing the presentation, and just
Yes,
let me know if it changes, it changes. So
yep, you're good.
okay, so as you mentioned in the introduction, this is part of the work what I was recognized as a visionary of 2022 for the Edtech magazine, and I'm gonna share some of the insights and some of the work. First, I'm gonna start by discussing how diverse Latin America really is. It's very difficult to make a sense of what the region entails. We have basically 2 languages. We have basically 650 million population. Basically, it's a very young population, but you have a lot of diversity, many other languages, many different setups. And you're gonna find within the region, you're gonna find everything from elite, innovative schools and universities to some of them that are really falling behind. So what I'm gonna do is just give you this broad view. So you need to see Latin America not as a country by country type of basis, but see it as a region. And as a region of 650 million population, basically you'll find more commonality in Latin America that you would probably find within India or within China, because of the different settings that you find in these large markets. But it's very difficult that companies look at Latin America as that, as an integrated region. And typically what happens is that you lose economies of scale and potential by starting in one country and then trying to go to the next country and then trying to map the different nuisances between each one of them. So my first message to you is to look at the region as a broad region, as 2 main languages, and you probably begin segmenting the strategy, as we do with customers, in 2 major segments: Spanish-speaking Latin America, and then Brazil as the Portuguese-speaking market. And within that, then you're gonna find the commonalities, rather than trying to map, specific curriculum, specific areas in each one of the regions. So you're going to see that, of course, Brazil is the largest market in the region. You have almost 200 people there, and then 120 something in Mexico. But the difference in scale makes Brazil is a more complex country to do business with. So you're going to have to probably, when you map Latin America into these 2 segments, the Spanish-speaking Latin America would be similar to Brazil, with a little less complexity in doing businesses. So the way I typically work with customers around the world is to start with the Spanish-speaking Latin America, select a few cities, and then grow from there to the rest of the region. Now we're living a very important moment. Latin America's population is going to be bigger. It's going to be bigger than Europe in the next few years. But that also creates a set of challenges. We're going to be less educated. The economical differences and the inequality in Latin America is going to create even bigger challenges. So you see here data from the World Bank on how Latin America is beginning to lose the demographical instinct, the demographic advantages that we used to have a few years back. So the population, the young population, is beginning to fall down, and the older population is beginning to grow. This calls for a number of opportunities in the upskilling, reskilling, lifelong learning type of environment. And this is what is going to also create additional set of opportunities that we probably have not seen before. Now, this is a very important point. Latin America is highly urbanized. You probably will not do business in Argentina. You're going to do mostly Buenos Aires, or in Chile, you're going to do mostly Santiago. So one of the key strategies.
Excuse me, Fernando, do you need to move your slides forward by any chance?
Oh, yeah, that's what, yeah.
Somebody has asked about that.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not changing for some reason. So you haven't seen the slides moving, right?
No, just your first slide.
That's terrible. Let me try to go back. I don't know why. Typically, now I am not able to share again. Michael, can you please help here? Trying to share again. There you are.
There
So
you
I'm gonna try to keep it. Can you see it changing now?
Yes.
Okay. So let me go back just quickly. So I was telling you then first the size of the region, and I'm gonna probably make it bigger because when I do it in presentation mode, for some odd reason, it doesn't allow the change happening in Zoom for some reason. So anyways, just double checking. So again, this is the number of population in each one of the countries, and this is how we see the projection of Latin America surpassing Europe. Again, the projection of young population coming down and older population growing in the next few decades is changing the environment and creating additional opportunities. And I was here mentioning then how urbanized the region has become. And basically then, if you do a strategy where you capture 2 or 3 cities in at least 2 or 3 countries, then you become regional faster. Everything in Latin America would probably happen in between 15 to 18 cities in the region. So you don't need to look at the whole scenario, but if you enter the Latin America region, you're going to have a strategy where you define 3 cities, and probably these cities is going to have 1 in Mexico or 2 in Mexico and 1 in either Colombia or Argentina or Chile, and then you become regional more quickly. So the idea here is that you look, this is some of the basic indicators of Latin America. I'm not gonna give you a lot of detail because the numbers are small, but basically you're gonna find the economy, and we're probably gonna share this presentation afterwards so you have it as reference. But I'm gonna just make a focus in terms of the number of higher ed institutions. You look at Brazil and it has, 2,500, Mexico has 1,600, and then Colombia 247 in higher education. Those mostly have a different setting. The difference between public education and private education in the region is highly significant. You're going to have some instances, for example, in Brazil, where the public education system in the higher ed space is the most qualified and the better quality. But basically what happens is that the elite students that studied in private schools would go naturally into higher education public segment, while the private sector in Brazil would probably serve the less advantaged population. And this is a different dynamic that you're going to find in most other Latin America countries, where the private higher education institutions typically have better quality. One element to look at this is the average tuition prices, and you're going to see that you're going to get quality education at much cheaper prices than what you get in Europe or the US. And there is a phenomenon here in Argentina, which is one of the best universities are in Argentina, but for the cheapest price. And you're going to have a dynamic then. Argentina receives proportionately much more international student populations than any other country because of this combination. So these are kind of contra-intuitive information that probably you would not find unless you have these insights. And I'm gonna give you a few elements of discussion and reflection here. There is a lot of conversation and a lot of partnerships happening. I'm gonna focus in this one, which is the Pacific Alliance. The Pacific Alliance includes Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. And there is a lot of exchange happening, a lot of discussions in terms of recognizing education, in terms of connecting business, in terms of making sure that there are some synergies between institutions. And there is a specific example that has developed based on this concept of regional perspective, which is called the Triada. The Triada is basically a partnership between the best university in Mexico, Tec de Monterrey, the best university in Chile, Católica, and the best university in Colombia, Andes. These three universities have begun since a couple of years ago to develop joint programs, certificates, exchange of students, exchange of teachers. And this is just the beginning. This is going to begin happening everywhere in terms of alliances and partnerships. Now, you see the innovation economies in the region. You see that Chile is considered the most innovative economy, but it's number 50 in the world. So the innovation challenge and the way COVID impacted the research and development, the technology adoption, and the social economical impacts in the region create a big opportunity for technology to close these gaps. And I think when you compare, the US is at number 2, so it's disproportionately low, the level of innovation within these economies. So what is happening then? You're gonna see that as technology picks up speed, and I've added ChatGPT here at the top, you're gonna see that a lot of the population in the region are still in the early stages and on the emerging technologies, but not really have begun adapting to the disruptive technologies. And as this space accelerates, the opportunities to reskill, upskill, to transform educational systems, to integrate technology at scale become very, very relevant. So you see that you have this element of low-level skilling. Latin America traditionally has bet on low wages to do the manufacturing work that nobody else wanted to do. A little bit like China, and we competed with China in many segments. So now we need to accelerate to the knowledge economy, and that creates a number of challenges by which the region is not really ready. Now, this is probably the most informative slide, which has the different countries. You see Uruguay, which has about 1 million students. You have Chile that has about 5 million. Then you have Brazil with almost 52 million students. Mexico that sits at about 37. So you see this diversity in terms of number of students, the different areas. And that is why it creates a different challenge when you look at these countries. Where do you start? How do you select the markets? Who are the right partners? Do you focus in the private schools or the public schools? All of these discussions are exactly the type of work that we do, and this is part of the partnership that we're building together. You see, the Latin America market has a lot of public education, a lot of government-owned type of schools, and basically they are very far from technology. It's very hard to do business in the public sector. So what that creates is a challenge by which all of the technology providers are actually sitting on the private segment. So just so you can do your own numbers here, if you look at most of the sizes and numbers of schools, you're probably going to find 10 to 12% across the region that are private schools. Within that, about 20% would have the technology, the budget, the internal capability to adapt to technology. So it ends up being a very small space where you only have 2 to 3% of schools that are able to really capture that opportunity. In the university space, it's a little bigger than that. It's probably easier, and you're going to probably find more openness and opportunity in some of the public education, in the public higher education segment. So these considerations have to be taken into place because otherwise you believe that the size of the business and you can enter the government and the public education, which is really a challenge, especially for companies that do not have a long-standing presence, relationship with governments of officials, and they are known in the market and they have a track record. So that creates additional challenges where the partnership strategy, the channel partners, the level of pilots and the demonstration of outcomes become critical. And this is a long journey. So you cannot expect that you're going to capture and get traction within less than 12 months of effort. And that creates some challenges because some of the customers that we work with, they believe they have an amazing technology. They believe they have solved challenges in many other markets. Then they come to Latin America and you have to build a relationship. You have to start, you have to demonstrate, you have to win some of these reference accounts, and then you begin capturing market. So this is a long, long journey. Now, again, we have a lot of challenges. The need of quality, you can see here some of the results in terms of the PISA results and OCDE. You find that Latin America has very poor performance, both in number of students and also in schools. And the other main challenge is the dropout rate. You see the chart that you have a lot of students that are falling down, millions and millions of talented young people that are leaving school early on. And this is true mostly for the most vulnerable. So that is an additional challenge. When you look at the OCDE PISA results, you see at the bottom, you have Chile, Mexico, Colombia sitting at the bottom of the results. So the quality of education, it's a great challenge. Now, with that being said, you also are going to find a small number of highly sophisticated schools, highly sophisticated universities that are probably competing with the best in the world and have the best that there is. So this is why you need to really understand what is the impact, what is the dimension that you're going to see. So another element that I also wanted to bring into the information that I'm sharing is the role that unions have in the public education segment. They are very, very powerful. They are highly political. They sometimes block this type of innovation. And you need to understand the dynamics of the educational unions in most of the world. Typically, what we have found is that the smaller countries are the best place to enter public education. So Uruguay, because of the Plan Ceibal and some other initiatives that they run, Costa Rica, sometimes in Ecuador, sometimes in Chile, those would be the best places for you to start. If you want to go to public education in Brazil or in Mexico, highly, highly complex, long-term, and basically you have a more powerful, more politically, and sometimes even corruption around the place. So you need to navigate through all of that to capture these opportunities. So again, a few numbers in terms of the opportunities, the challenges, the private universities, the public university segments that are probably relevant as you begin to think on your own strategy. You're going to have a very diverse set of offering. You have universities that are, again, catering to the elites, and then you have low-cost universities that are basically capturing a very interesting segment, which is growing amazingly rapidly and amazingly well, which is the young adult first-generation students. This is a generation that missed higher education in their typical age group. So they didn't go to school when they were 18, and they are entering for the first time when they are 30 or 35. And therefore, the combination of flexible models and low cost are models that are really growing. A lot of venture capital is investing in this segment because it's a large number of population that now needs to go back to universities with a different model in pricing. The other strategy that we work with customers has to do with working with the associations of universities in this case. So you have a number of bodies that basically get together, they act as a consortia, they have meetings, they have committees that work together, and this is the best way to gain scale. But in order for you to get into this level of conversation, you do need at least 2 or 3 reference accounts, some level of outcome demonstration if you're going to grow. And this is what typically requires about a year. As I mentioned, the for-profit sector in higher education has to do a lot with how the Brazilian market has developed. A number of private equity, a number of investments, a number of mergers and acquisitions are making this segment very, very active. And again, this is serving not the elite students, but rather the low-cost students. And the public education is basically serving the elite. And this is a phenomenon that only happens in Brazil. So you see, there's a lot of money being spent in education in the region, but not necessarily a lot of money spent in innovation and in technology and that type of thing. So why is that? Basically, 90-something% of the budget is dedicated to the teacher unions, and they pay salaries, and it's already committed and it's already fixed. So it's very difficult to get additional budget. And how we work with this challenge is we typically bring together the funders and the solutions together. So for example, we work with USAID, the Inter-America Development Bank, the World Bank, some of the foundations that already have grants, money, and investment to the governments, and we work on those two areas. You work with the funder and you work with the government, and that opens the door for significant investments in education. As you can see, having a very low set of talent that arrives to higher education is also a major challenge in the region. One of the things that we are seeing is the connection between Latin America and the Hispanic US market. Very interesting. So this is some of the companies that we are helping that began teaching Hispanic students in the US and are now expanding into Latin America. And the other way around, some of our customers that develop nice solutions in the Spanish-speaking Latin America are entering the Hispanic market in the US. And this is why we decided to do an investment and a partnership with a company called Latin Business Today, which is a media company that works with Hispanic business owners and provides now educational services to these Hispanic businesses. So I thought this would be interesting in the sense of this connection. Very few companies understand the relevance of the Hispanic market in the US, the need that there is in terms of Spanish-speaking solutions, content, and support, and how the connection between Latin America and the Hispanic US makes sense. So this is some of the discussions while we do a strategy on how to take advantage of this combination. Connectivity was significantly a challenge in the region, as it was even in the US and other markets. But for us in Latin America, it really took us by a significant amount of impact because of the low level of connectivity. So this is a report that was recently published by The Economist in terms of the share of children that are unable to read and understand what they're reading in the different parts of the world. And you see Latin America became probably the most impacted region in the world, where you're going to find almost 80% of those students at year 10 that are unable to read and understand what they're reading. So what that creates is a huge challenge of solving these type of needs at scale, with legitimacy, with speed. A lot of things are now being invested in connectivity, 5G, and all of that. So what happens is Latin America, as well as India and some countries in Africa, is probably going to have less of a, we're going to have a jump in the gap between having no phone, no access to technology, to having the smartphone as the first phone ever. So the transition periods in the region can create these type of waves of acceleration and technology. And I'm going to show you one of the customers, one of the partners that we have in the region that basically developed a technology to work using simple SMS technology to create some sort of learning management system and content for the less developed regions. These type of solutions have become very relevant. So when you look at your own technology in the developed markets, sometimes you forget, or sometimes, it's important that you have an offline solution that you connect even with this type of partners to say, how do we make our content, our experience, our learning arrive to this type of population? So this creates then a number of potential possibilities, challenges, routes that you need to consider. And that is why I think doing the strategy right and understanding these challenges, starting small and then growing, becomes very, very relevant. There is a thriving set of entrepreneurs in the region that are transforming education. I am going to share some of my work with these entrepreneurs. We have created this alliance, this network. We have about 650 members of EdLatam Alliance. These are the leading organizations, universities, schools, investors, and Edtechs. We have over 200 Edtechs in the region. This community sits all together. We work with them every week. We provide newsletters. We create collaborative programs. And the idea is exploding this network as part of your own entrance. If you're a company in the US, you can come through this alliance. You can get your first pilots. You're going to get your validation. You're going to get some of these channel partners to evaluate some of these customers. And that creates a soft landing scenario and environment for you to grow. So this has been my work for over a decade now, where I found that people that understood education did not understand technology, that people that understood technology did not understand education. Neither one of them understood the capital requirements, the investment, the shifting of budgets, and neither one of the three understood the impact, the gaps, the needs on closing those challenges at scale. And this is why I dedicated myself and the team for over 10 years to develop that. There is a lot of investment coming in the region. This was 2021. Of course, 2022 has been a significant reduction in terms of investment in the region, but you're going to find some models that are unique. For example, the Sistemas de Ensino, the learning systems in Brazil. This is basically how most of the schools in Brazil operate. And you see the rounded cycle there. You see that these systems are serving 1.2 million students. And the idea of these systems is that they provide everything for a school, from admin systems to enrollment, to English, to STEM, through coding and language and all of that. So the idea of these learning systems is something that you need to understand, which is different than having an LMS and then teacher development and then specific solutions on STEM or specific content on reading and math and science. Basically, it's an all-you-can-eat digital solution. So what is the challenge for you as a company? That you would probably need to be integrated into these ecosystems. You need to be part of the hub of technology rather than a good solution. And sometimes this creates a challenge for our organizations globally because they are not able to connect, integrate well. There is a lot of M&A, there is a lot of integration and consolidation happening in schools. There are international schools being acquired, consolidating, and there's also the same type of approach in the region. So just to give you an idea of how a typical Edtech in the region will position would be first of scale, first of testimonials, second, a large number of awards, recognitions, and that type of thing. And you see how they typically scale in Latin America. This is a true case of a company that has been operating in the region. It was a small company from Argentina that became a Latin America leading organization in K-12 in many different countries. So this is the type of approach that you're probably going to experiment. So you see a number of players that are in the region, from a full solution to small players or granular, and you need to communicate, see who's doing that and who is capturing more market share, and maybe who do you partner with to grow together with them rather than becoming one more in the scenario. This is also another example of a company that has been very successful. This is a case in Mexico. This is also a K-12 ecosystem that integrates a number of solutions, a number of different players, so you can become part of this type of solutions. This is another example. This is a company from Colombia that began doing virtual labs for the region, and now it has expanded to the world. So there is a lot of innovation and a lot of acceleration. I also wanted to point out as a case study a program that we did last year, or actually 2020, in the middle of COVID, which was building an app to teach teachers how to do digital education. And these type of solutions work really, really well because they are kind of a bypassing the traditional teacher development scenario and building some level of solutions. You're going to see that Latin America has an amazing adoption of social media and tools. Here's the example of my friend Sandro in Brazil, who teaches math in TikTok for about 5 million students. So when you look at Latin America, you have to also integrate the idea of how you're going to use social media to reach, to connect, and to develop relationships. Latin America has the most hours of use in social media and some disproportionate level of adoption in social media. If we could only have in education the same penetration that Facebook or WhatsApp have in the region, we would be in a totally different position. So this is something also that is probably unique in the region that you have to integrate in your strategies. I just wanted to continue the showcase for a few minutes. This is a company that started in Chile. It's a company that built algorithms to optimize the resources in universities, that has expanded also to the US, to the UK, to Australia, basically because of their capabilities. You're going to find a lot of technological capabilities. Sometimes the companies come to Latin America to find talent, development, social media expertise. So this is, again, UPlanner has been recognized as one of the top edtechs in the region. It started with a very small market in Chile and now has become global. So when you see that, this is another model of integration and consolidation. This is a company from Colombia that basically creates this hub and integrates a number of courses. So you see that they work with Coursera, with Class for Zoom, with other elements. So this idea of making it easy, having one supplier and basically integrating that into experience, is a model that works well in the region. So let me speed this up just to close in a couple of minutes. But the idea is you're beginning to see this type of companies enter the Latin America from a corporate perspective. This is an actual company in Mexico City that has thousands of gamers hired to deliver via Uber Eats, deliver food in the city of Los Angeles in the States. You're going to find a lot of these type of models changing the future of work. So the way we work is that we connect with a large ecosystem. We have partners around the world, we have channels, we have suppliers, we have institutions, and we create the best of the world to Latin America and bring Latin America to the world. We began doing work now with Africa. As you can see, Africa and Latin America share many of these challenges, and there's a lot of synergy happening. We work with Israel, we work with Australia, we work with many different. So I'm gonna close this by showing you the work that we do with our friends in Holon IQ. We help curate and evaluate the top 100 edtechs in the region. Some of these may be competitors, some of these may be partners, but there is a thriving and growing and very mature segment of edtechs in Latin America. And there's a number of events next week. Michael and I are going to be in Monterrey in this Edtech summit that the Tech de Monterrey is having. We have for 8 years developed the Global Edtech Startup Awards. This year we're providing the award, the Global Award. This is 20 countries in the world competing for the best edtech in the world, and we're giving the award this year in Monterrey, Mexico, as part of this event. So we can curate, bring the events, represent some of these companies. We recently launched EdOps, some of you may know this podcast from the US that has been very successful, over 500,000 downloads. So we created, with a number of leaders in education, the EdOps Experience podcast in Spanish, to also provide a channel of communication and ideas. You can also be part of this effort or sponsor some of these conversations to reach. This is an example of an event that happens in Peru. Some of the topics that are discussed in the events, some of the things that drive the agenda of discussion, and how they create this type of content, how they bring this regional perspective, and how they operate on this idea that Latin America is mostly one integrated region. I have recently begun work with T4, a new organization that is doing the Global Teacher Summit, the World Best School Award, and things like that. And I think these are also different ways for you to enter and know the market. And some of the products that we developed over the years has been like a virtual trade mission. This is a work that we do with the Australian government, which basically they select 8 or 10 Edtechs from Australia, and then we introduce them to the decision makers in the region. We do this every year. We select them, we connect them, and we have a number of Australian companies that have entered Latin America. So this is the idea of open innovation in the region, when you bring together all these players, and these are some of the customers that we have worked or are currently doing work for in the region. So this is what I prepared for you. I leave here my information, my data, if you want to connect and continue the conversation. And hopefully this has been a valuable reflection, and hopefully we can continue to work together. And then Michael and we are very happy, George, to have this partnership, and hopefully some of your customers would be interested in expanding to Latin America.
Michael, I think I'll let you bring up those slides.
Okay.
I'd like to see a few familiar names that are attending, and glad to see some of you that I know. And Fernando did a great job there with all the information that he had. That was fantastic. And I can see why he knows the market very well. Let's see, can everybody see that, Michael? Do I need to enlarge that?
I can
Can you
make it
enlarge that?
larger if you want me to.
Where it's just the slide there, it's got some other stuff at the top. Yeah, you got the next slide there. If that can be eliminated, that would enlarge that, but that might still be okay.
Is that it?
No, you're getting the next slide.
I need to flip it.
Yeah, we just need the first slide there. Anyway, I'm going to do a very brief overview of the international school market in Latin America, which is basic, and this is some of what would be defined as what Fernando did as the private market, not the government market. And I've spent a lot of my time over the last 20, 30 years focusing my attention on international schools overseas, a lot of it in Middle East, Latin America, Europe, and some in Asia. But I'm going to go through here. There we go. Here's kind of the agenda: international school market. Again, this is the international school market is defined by ISC out of the UK. Many of you may know that or subscribe to that. As a school that's in a country where English is not the native language. So obviously wouldn't include the US, Canada, UK. But I wanted to be sure you understand the definition we're using for the next few slides. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the international school market, then drill down to the Latin America market. IB stands for the International Baccalaureate programs that many of you may work with, or if not, you should be looking at. A few comments on trade shows and associations and market strategy. Now, what this shows from ISC data, and some of this is a couple years old, but I have some updated information, is you will see that in 2019, there were nearly 11,000 international schools worldwide. And that number now has gone over 13,000 as of the end of 2022. And they expect that to grow to over nearly 19,000 by 2029 and probably be larger. So in the last 4 years, there have been an additional 2,000 international schools added worldwide for a number of reasons. Most of them is that students from around the world go to these schools and they want to go to a Western university. So typically may go to an international school, or in some countries where they cannot get into a government school, or the government schools may not be as good as they'd like to have for the quality of education they're looking for, as some of the comments that Fernando made. Now, again, this just shows the market the last 2 years kind of carved out by region. It shows Asia having 58% of the international schools. I've never liked kind of the definition they use. That includes Western Asia, which is the Middle East, and then a lot of the obviously countries in China and India. So it kind of skews the number here from the standpoint of how large that number really is. But so you have to break down the Asia number. And then you have Europe, the Americas, which is basically Latin America, including Central and South America, and the Caribbean. And that equals about 2,000 schools now. I should say about 1,700 in Latin America. I've put together a chart here, which will show you the top 10 Latin America countries as of the end of 2022. And you'll see kind of goes back to some of the numbers that Fernando showed earlier, that Brazil has got 378 international schools, Mexico nearly 300, Argentina has 227, and the list goes down. Now, I don't have all the countries listed there, but I want to just show the magnitude of the top 10. I also want to comment that Brazil is actually the 7th largest country in the world for international schools, Mexico the 15th, and Argentina the 18th. So out of the top 20 countries in the world for international schools, Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina are in the top 20. I also will mention that the curriculum is used in these schools. Most of them are either British or US curriculum, and many of them have international baccalaureate, either one of the programs or all of the programs. And I will, let me go to the next slide and I'll talk about the International Baccalaureate in a little more detail. International Baccalaureate, IB as it's called in Latin America, there are over 450 International Baccalaureate programs in international schools. There are, as some of you may know, 4 programs that IB offers. Some schools may have 1, 2, 3, or all the programs. You can go to the IB website, ibo.org. If you're not familiar with it, it has all the countries, schools listed in there. It's got a lot of good information, so you can target different countries where if you're doing work with IB schools, I would suggest you take a look at that. They have an annual conference for the Americas, which includes Canada, US, and Latin America. This year it's always the end of July, roughly. This year will be in Toronto, Canada. Last year it was in San Diego. That's probably the largest conference that IB has. They also have one in March, which is always in Asia, and one in October for Middle East, Europe, and Africa. You can go to any of them, but I'm just emphasizing here the Latin America one. By the way, as you may know, IB works in 3 different languages, English, French, and Spanish. So obviously, Spanish is a key language for IB. This is some of the regional overseas associations that if you're not involved in, you should be. I'm involved with a few of these, particularly the Middle East one. You'll see that the second and third links here are for the associations in South America and Central America and the Caribbean and Mexico. If you go to the websites for these, you will see what they have to offer, including annual meetings, a good place to go and be involved either as a speaker or have a booth. So I very much, these are very niche organizations, but usually have the decision makers that you want to interact with, including the heads of schools and curriculum directors. Whoops, I just went ahead of myself there. I was going to mention in that slide that we just went past that next week, as Fernando mentioned, is the Monterrey large EdTech show for Latin America. That will be in Monterrey, Mexico. And then I mentioned the IB one and those, there we go. The IB in late July, and then those trade associations. Now, there's many more activities. These are just a few listed. You might also, let me go to this next slide. Sorry about that. Seems to be a little slow here. There we go. So I think Fernando mentioned some of these strategies. I will just kind of re-emphasize, and many of you may, nothing surprising here, but where I typically try to help companies is with direct sales with schools or with governments. You may be interested in resellers. Many companies want to have resellers as they grow their business to help them with marketing and sales and training. Also, you may reach a point where you want to have your own office. Many large firms do. Not always necessary in this kind of business. I mentioned the ISC database. If you're not familiar with that, that's probably the best database for international schools and information to generate email campaigns, workshops, webinars. Again, there's those trade shows listed. For those of you from US companies that may be on that I know are on this, you should be looking into what state you're in. Some states have funding to visit trade shows or attend or participate and pay half of your expenses. The US government now has, for the last few years, has a number of free webinars on different countries. They had some on back in November on Brazil and the education market there. I know that Canada, Australia, as Fernando mentioned, all have trade missions or special funding sources to help you participate overseas if you're a small firm. And you should take advantage of those, because I know many firms, and I know a few that are even on this call, that have taken advantage of funding sources like in Virginia, the state there. You have to be headquartered in those states or be registered to take advantage of those programs. And this is my last slide. As I mentioned, this was going to be kind of quick, but if you like, I think we'll be sending out copies of this information and data. And this is ways you can reach me. And Michael, I'll turn it back to you if we have time for any questions, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, if there's any questions in the
Michael, you seem to be muted.
Yeah.
if we have any questions, we can answer those. I think one of the questions we had was we will be sending out a copy of the slides and of the presentation, and those will go out on Friday. So look for those in your email. If you have any questions, feel free to ask those now in the chat, and Fernando and George are available to answer any of those. Here's one for you. How critical do you feel Spanish PD is in Latin America?
Yeah, this is typically, I mean, most of what happens in professional development is in Spanish. But given that sometimes you can pilot and try some of the most of the countries would have bilingual schools, bilingual universities, and sometimes you can pilot and monitor if you have a potential to grow in the region with your English language, and just do it as a pilot and then grow from there and adapt to Spanish. So you don't need to build everything in Spanish at the stage number one. You can pilot, try it, validate, see the opportunity, and then do the translation. And there is enough English around the ecosystem where you can at least get a sense of the opportunity.
Okay, another one is, and thank you, Yasid, is what key role have you found in Latin America recently regarding bilingualism and government policies around it?
Yeah, so the need of English in the region is huge. There is, a significant alignment between learning English and improving the lives of families completely. So this is clear for most of the region. If you learn English, the opportunities that open for you are very, very significant. Having said that, there is a few countries that have tried bilingualism as part of the public policy, and that has not really changed. One of the key elements is because of the lack of teachers and the lack of investment in that. So basically, you would find that people that speak English most likely are in the private sector, in bilingual schools, bilingual universities. Many universities already offer bilingual programs right now, but in terms of being this a public policy, still very difficult. And therefore, some of the ideas would be to partner with organizations like I am part of the board of the Latin America TESOL Association. So this is the English Teaching Association in Latin America, and working through them to try to get into these programs.
Okay, and then thank you, Jim, for asking this one. To what extent is political turmoil impacting education markets in key countries? Not that the U.S. doesn't have its own issues, but curious as to how this impacts strategy for new markets to Latin American markets.
Again, this mostly affects the public education. I think in Latin America, there is a very strong link between politics and education, unfortunately. The drivers sometimes are not quality of learning, access of learning, but rather how to win more votes and how they use the strength and the scale of education. So it's highly politicized. You find locally some districts, some states that probably have the right leadership and the right vision, and you need to enter through these public spaces, public segment opportunities early on in the government. So one of the things that you need to understand is how long of a mandate is still true for this particular public servant that is leading a more visionary type of approach into the public education. And you need to read through that and try to find them early in their mandate, rather than when they have 1 or 2 years ahead of them. So this is the type of intelligence that you need to build if you're going to try to enter public education.
I was going to add to that, is I have found, though, working with some of the international schools in Latin America recently, that hasn't the turmoil hasn't had a big impact on some of the things I'm involved in. It doesn't mean it may not, but with some of the countries, it hasn't been a big issue yet. And I think that I would agree with Fernando's comments. Probably a bigger issue with the public schools.
We know that it's 2 o'clock and many of you have other meetings to attend. We have 3 more questions. We'll get to those questions right now, but we understand if you need to drop off at this point. Aaron has asked, do you think the marketing of EFL products should be mainly in Spanish or in English?
Yeah, I have seen that EFL typically does it in English. I think you need to be creative in the sense of what type of marketing message you need to send, but there is enough English, even at the lowest basis, where you can begin to have an impact. So I have seen a lot of the marketing efforts in EFL happening exclusively in English, but it does need to speak in a different way. So selecting the proper wording, the proper message to have an impact, I think it's a critical discussion.
Okay. And then Jorge asked, how do you think educational robotics is impacting Latin America? And what needs to be done to democratize robotics in this region?
Yeah, there are a number of critical initiatives. I am aware of at least one in Argentina, where most of the public schools began doing robotics. There are a number of contests and awards that are given to robotics. I think robotics, coding, all of the STEM areas are in significant need of an approach. So I think robotics plays a significant role. I think the governments are still not using it, but in the bilingual, multi-country, multilingual schools, this has a significant impact. So take a look at Argentina's in the city of Buenos Aires. The robotics public policy has been very successful and is now a reference. And also in Uruguay, Plan Ceibal has done significant approaches to robotics, which I think are worth knowing.
And then our final question is from Lorena. What is the first strategy you would use to introduce an EFL platform as for middle schoolers in Latin America?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to answer that without knowing specifically. There are a lot of players in the region. This is something that you really need to work on. Why are you different? Why are you relevant? What is the outcome? What is the scale and the quality of your learning? So I think the best way to do, and this is true for most of the customers that we work with, is to establish a reference account and measure the outcomes that are significant. And then based on these outcomes, then to get scale. So sometimes buying market in a sense of buying the initial 2 reference accounts, measuring and having someone like a third party validate your impact is going to give you a headway ahead.
Yeah, and I agree with those comments and have to take a look at what they're offering. I'm not sure the international schools would be appropriate for this, but it might be.
I want to thank everyone today for attending our webinar. It's been very insightful, and I definitely want to thank George and Fernando. Thanks so much for taking your time today to share your insights. So we appreciate that. And if you should have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us here at Advancing Global, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Thanks so much and have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thank you.